So that's problem number one. Problem number two is we're stuck with a lot of so-called legacy equipment and platforms and tactics and operational thinking that make no sense. We're still pursuing this global military hegemony when there's neither the need for it, nor is it something we should aspire to, because it's unattainable.
Yeah.
This is the dream of universal empire and international governance. It's all nonsense. It won't work. We can't afford it. We don't want it. We don't need it. So the bottom line is, Eisenhower used to say the American people want prosperity and security. And he said they deserve both. And he made it clear that in order for the American people to have both prosperity and security, that there had to be limitations on the amount of resources that were invested in defense, because he understood very well there's very little return on investment. I mean, you can only build so much equipment, and then suddenly you reach the tipping point where you go beyond that. There's no return on it, because in a certain number of years, it's no longer valuable. And there's no salvage value unless you can sell your secondhand equipment to nations around the world that want to buy it.
Yeah, pennies on the dollar. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole thing it makes no sense. So they are part of this warfare state that sees great profit in the war thus far. They haven't been on the receiving end of losses. This is the difference between Eisenhower and many of the presidents that succeeded him. Eisenhower did not emerge from World War II convinced that we could conquer the world. On the contrary, he looked at what the Soviets went through and the Germans, and he said, we can never do that. That is not something the American Republic can sustain. And so he said, we can't go to war again and ever repeat this kind of performance. So he wanted to build alliances to try and deter, but he wanted to focus investment at home on the prosperity and the economic and scientific industrial power that we needed to develop. We are still living on the legacy of Eisenhower. That includes our nuclear deterrent. That includes the structure that we live in. Everything is a legacy of what Eisenhower did in the 1950s. Well, here we are in 2021. That legacy has gotten us a long way, but now it's putting us at great risk. We need a new structure, a new way forward, and we have to rebuild that prosperity.
Indeed, we do. And in the last bit of time we have here, I wonder if you can kind of war game something out for our audience. I know in conversations you and I have had over many years in the past, is that you've often looked at the British when they lost their empire. And I think that probably World War II, the victory was actually the death knell in some of that. What is the risk to America in the current age if we get broken militarily and we actually get the wars that we're threatening and it costs us everything? What is the impact on the other side of that to American prosperity?
Well, I think there's always a danger that we end up like Britain after World War II. Britain was interested in World War I in quote unquote expanding its empire. That's why the Versailles Treaty produced, places like Iraq and Jordan and Saudi Arabia and so forth and Syria. We carved up the Ottoman Empire. We shrank Germany. We were trying to position ourselves. I mean, the British were trying to position themselves to be a world power, only to discover it was an illusion. They ended up getting out of all of those places because it cost them more to be there than they could afford. And as World War II approached, they insisted that they were defending their empire, especially India, the Suez Canal, the route to India, which was the British cash cow. Well, that didn't work out, did it? They lost everything. We could lose everything. We could definitely become completely isolated, and we may not be able to recover as a great power. This, I think, is what Mearsheimer and others have talked about, and they're right. You put everything at risk over what you think at the time is important. It turns out it wasn't. When nobody ever bothers to point out, and this is just a sidebar, but when Hitler invaded Western Europe, this was not a war of conquest. He was simply interested in neutralizing Britain and France and the other countries so that he would have a free hand against the Soviets. What if the British had said, fine, we'll back off. You can have a free hand with the Soviets. We would have seen a different outcome. But the British were obsessed with destroying Germany. We seem to be obsessed with destroying Russia. And Russia hasn't invaded anybody and doesn't want to. The whole thing in Ukraine is because we goaded them into it. The Chinese, where are the massive Chinese armies ready to strike into Southeast Asia? They don't exist. And the Chinese Navy, at least a third or more of it, qualifies as a Coast Guard because that's their real objective, is to protect China's coast against whom? Us.
Yeah.
You know, why are they worried about Taiwan? Because we might put missiles on it. We need to get out of these places and stop threatening everyone. We may discover that we actually have an opportunity to do business and develop ourselves economically. But no one's thinking about that. The British didn't think about it in the 30s. We're not thinking about it now. The outcome was Britain was destroyed. We inherited everything that the British had. They lost everything. There's no one to inherit us.
Yeah, except for probably China and Russia would certainly benefit if we felt about that, because I think they could afford the losses much better than we can, because I don't need to read.
Well, actually, if you sit down and you talk to them, they don't want to lose us as a trading partner. They don't want our commercial capability destroyed. They want to do business with us. That's what we don't seem to understand.
No, we don't at all. And we are definitely locked in this mentality at the so-called elite level that all we can see is the barrel of a gun. And if it doesn't have the